China's pressure campaign has shifted to Second Thomas Shoal in the aftermath of a Chinese Navy warship crashing into its Coast Guard vessel at Scarborough Shoal. Up to 25 Chinese vessels a day, some armed, even with mounted weapons, have been spotted by the Philippine Coast Guard over the past 2 weeks. And the presence of a Chinese tugboat among them is sparking concerns Beijing means to tow away Manila's grounded, rusting Sierra Madre warship. But the Philippines is confident there is no threat.
It will take more than a tugboat to pull out Sierra Madre. So it is our assessment that that tugboat is for their own use in the event that the ships that are now inside Ayungin Shoal would run aground.
This comes as China ramps up a different kind of campaign to rewrite history. Ahead of the 80th anniversary of Japan's surrender in World War II, Beijing has launched propaganda linking sovereignty over the South China Sea to Japan's defeat, as it has done for decades over Taiwan. At the same time, Chinese online users are claiming, quote, Batanes once belonged to China and Manila, quote, illegally occupied the islands in 1946 during China's civil war. Where is all this coming from and what does it achieve? Joining us today are Renato Cruz de Castro, National Zhengzhou University MOFA Taiwan Fellow and De La Salle University Department of International Studies Distinguished Professor. And we also have Titus Chen, National Zhengzhou University Institute of International Relations Research Professor and Deputy Director. Renato, Titus, warm welcome back to Taiwan Talks.
Thank you.
Let's hear more on China's aggressive behaviour and renewed claims to Philippine territory from the Philippine Secretary of Defense. Watch.
The activities of China in any area, whether in the Sierra Madre or any area under their nebulous claims, are a matter not only of concern but of condemnation, because these are in gross violations of international law.
Gilberto Tidoro made those comments as he signed a statement of intent to pursue a defence cooperation pact with Australia on August 22nd to counter China. That came as Australian and Philippine troops participated in their largest exercise to date involving live fire drills. Titus, let me come to you first. So going back to Second Thomas Shoal, the Philippines sent smaller boats out to basically repel the Chinese swarm of vessels further away from the Sierra Madre, which is the wrecked ship, which essentially stakes Manila's claim to this feature. Of course, there's real concern now, isn't there, about China's intentions and motives. How do you read the situation?
Well, I think if there is any lesson that China has learned from the unfortunate incident a few weeks ago, I think the only lesson China learns is we must do a better job next time we encounter Philippine ships. We've got to do coordination among ourselves better. Chinese law enforcement and the militia fleet will only push harder the next time they encounter Philippine resupply mission or any Philippine law enforcement vessels.
So you believe that will be the next test of this supposedly improved communication, that there's no prudence or that's overridden by, wanting to save face. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, indeed, because China is trying to send a strong message to not just the Philippines, but the international community that they're not going to back down. They want to show their resolve, and they want to tell the world that our resolve is not to be contested.
Right. And so, Renato, how risky does that make the next resupply mission, and also why focus on Second Thomas Shoal?
Well, it's part of what, Chinese playbook. A small power like the Philippines could not do it to us. So they now focus, of course, on Ayungin Shoal, which, of course, has always been part of this, one of the, what I call the flashpoints. Within the larger flashpoints, which, of course, is Spratlys. Of course, we have Scarborough Shoal, then now, of course, Ayungin Shoal. Let's see the possibility. I think in this case, it's not simply a matter of preventing the resupply mission. I think what they're basically impressing upon the Filipinos and, of course, the Philippine government and to the international community, we have the capability to basically drag the BRP Sierra Madre out of Ayungin Shoal.
So you believe that that tugboat is there to tow away the Sierra Madre, but Roy Vincent Trinidad said that he didn't believe that was the case.
Well, it's the message being sent by China. It's a psychological warfare. We're showing you our capability. We have it here, and we could do it anytime we want to. That's why, of course, the Philippine government, the Philippine Navy, and of course, Rear Admiral Trinidad would have to show a brave face. We're not intimidated by this Chinese psychological ploy.
Right. And Titus, however, at Second Thomas Shoal for about a year now, the resupply missions have been relatively smooth and safe. And that was because there was an agreement that was signed between the two after the latest very concerning international incident where China went after the Philippines with machete knives and one of the Filipino Navy officers lost his thumb. So how concerning is this development?
The Chinese government is trying to deliver a message that Beijing is capable of imposing effective control over these contested areas of water. It's accomplished fact, a fait accompli, a done deal to form the physical ground of effective occupation and administration in a legal fight in the future. So that's their agenda, and they're not going to back down in the near future.
Now, much farther north of the Philippines' Second Thomas Shoal lie Manila's northernmost islands of Batanes, which lie just 150 kilometers south of Taiwan at their northernmost point. However, some Chinese TikTok videos like this one from 4 days ago claim the 1898 Treaty of Paris excluded Batanes from Philippine territory, which justifies Chinese Coast Guard intrusions to, quote, move on Batanes. Watch.
菲律宾这下彻底懵了，压根没料到中国会拿巴丹群岛动真格，3艘海警船直扑而来，这手棋又快又狠，打得他们手忙脚乱，完全没了章法。要说中国为啥选在这儿动手，先看看老规矩，1898年的巴黎合约写得明明白白，菲律宾领土北界在北纬20度以南，可巴丹群岛在北边，按规矩就该是中国台湾的附属岛。2战后东大收回湾湾，这群岛本该一起回来，结果被菲律宾趁乱占了，压根没道理。这次巡航就是拿回应得的，没毛病。
And yet, a search of English texts, such as John Mears's Voyages Made in the Years 1788 and 1789, backs up the claim that Spain took control of Batanes Islands from its indigenous inhabitants by the second half of the 18th century. Mears cited British Squadron Commander William Drapier. At the time, Britain and Spain vied for conquest of the Philippines. At the end of the Spanish-American War of 1898, the 1898 Treaty of Paris was signed. This is the actual text. Article 3 says, Spain cedes to America the Philippines Islands within a line running from west to east along or near the 20th parallel of north latitude and through the middle of the navigable channel of Bashi. The words along or near are stressed, showing the 20th north parallel line is not an exact boundary. Batanes is in fact located at 20 degrees 15 minutes north. And to address the ambiguities of the 1898 Treaty of Paris, the US and Spain signed a further 1900 Treaty of Washington, stating Spain relinquishes to the United States all title and claim of title which she may have had at the time of the conclusion of the treaty, Peace of Paris, to any and all islands belonging to the Philippine archipelago lying outside the lines described in Article 3 of that treaty, and agrees that all such islands shall be comprehended in the cession of the archipelago as fully as if they had been expressly included within those lines. This 1852 scientific map of the Philippines reflects Batanes Islands as part of Philippine territory, and the US Coast and Geodetic Survey's 1899 to 1900 Atlas of the Philippine Islands shows Islas Batanes and Islas Babuanes as part of Islas Filipinas. Okay, so Renata, let me come to you. What, therefore, do you make of China's interpretation of history?
Well, again, that's basically the playbook of the Communist Party, making distortion of history. I think this is basically a psychological warfare against the Philippine government. After, of course, when President Marcos announced, in an interview when he was in India, first post, about how the Philippines would react in a Taiwan contingency. President Marcos courageously and prudently stated the fact that given our geography, given the fact that we have 250,000 Filipinos here, we cannot help but, be part of this. We would have to react in whatever form. Plus, of course, we are a treaty ally of the United States. If push comes to shove with the issue, of course, of any contingency in Taiwan, as President Marcos later said when he came back to Manila, will be dragged, kicking, and shouting. But what he basically stated is not a matter of policy. It's a statement basically of what would happen if that would case of a major armed contingency here in Taiwan. So this is my take. China is basically sending us a message. Both to the Philippines and Taiwan, we could basically prevent you from intervening in the Taiwan contingency because, of course, we have a game plan for Batanes. And of course, Batanes will play a very important role if push comes to shove over Taiwan.
So you believe that it is, in effect, a threat to the Philippines
It is.
if you, get involved in war over Taiwan, then we will basically take Batanes from you.
Yes, it's not as a threat, it's a preemptive action that we would separate, the fact that along with that narrative, for the first time it was reported by Commodore J. Tariela, the spokesperson of the National Task Force on the West Philippine Sea. For the first time, they observed the presence, the patrol conducted by, I think, 3 Chinese Coast Guard vessels passing through the Bashi Channel. So that narrative, that psychological warfare, then of course the sudden, unprecedented patrol by the Chinese Coast Guard along the coast, along the Bashi Channel. So this is something that Taiwan and the Philippines will have to take into account.
And so just briefly, what will be the effect of this threat or this preemptive action on the Philippines psychologically?
Psychologically, of course, we should not be intimidated by this because I think the prudent policy of the Philippines is to show to China, no way can you threaten us with this. In fact, what we will do is basically strengthen the capability of our armed forces and, of course, ensure that our alliance with the United States and security partnership with Japan would develop deterrence capability for any eventuality in the Batanes Island and probably north of the Mabulis Island.
Yeah. Titus, other than this psychological warfare, what other reasons or motives might there be?
Well, for the record, I have to say that from my understanding, in history, Imperial China never extended its administration over the Batanes Islands. So whatever this Chinese internet influencer claim is false and baseless and anti-historical. But why at this moment this message came out and still stays there without being censored or removed from the internet? That's the puzzle. One thing that came to my mind is this is meant to be part of a coordinated, concerted campaign targeting the Philippine government because of what the president said in India, because of the confrontational in what happened in the Scarborough Shoal and Second Thomas Shoal.
Okay, I want to show something that backs up the point that you are making. I want to show a tweet from the Philippine Navy. It reads, "The men and the women of the armed forces are convinced of the legitimacy of our stand and our fight in the West Philippine Sea." So you're saying it's targeted at the Philippines, it's trying to break that conviction?
Yes, one thing that China really dislikes and disproves whenever it happens is that a foreign country, especially first island chain countries and neighboring countries, talked about Taiwan when its leaders, its government, its senior officials publicly talked about Taiwan contingencies, Taiwan situations. That's kind of narrative that Beijing has tried to avoid and prevent it. That's one thing. The other thing is Beijing not only disapproves, but try its very best to prevent the coming closer of first island chain countries. And not just among themselves, but between them and the US. So I think is a concerted message telling the Philippine government that we're not happy with what you do. You got to stop what you are doing.
Renato, is there also an issue about CCP political legitimacy here? Because is this also a distraction? This is whipping up nationalism for the domestic audience because of the poor economic growth, because of the moral corruption among CCP high-ranking officials, especially in the military. Is the legitimacy being corroded, and therefore there needs to be a big push for that nationalism to legitimize or continue legitimizing the CCP?
In a way, that's what you call generating what you call the rally around the flag effect, which is a very convenient tool by governments if they're suffering from a certain political discontent or stasis. You basically use nationalism. Then, of course, you have to also add that narrative. We have these capabilities to subjugate countries who are challenging us, like, of course, the Philippines, along with its allies, along with Taiwan. So that's part of the grand narrative. China's power at the height of the 80th anniversary of the Asian people's victory against Japanese aggression. I still remember attending, I think, the 50th or 40th anniversary in 2005 in Beijing. I was part of that celebration then. We could talk more about it when 60. It was, that's 60.
You wouldn't be this year, though, would you? You're here. But Titus, you've actually carried out research on Philippine-related material in Chinese state media outlets. So in terms of those individual so-called private videos on TikTok Douyin, did you see any connection to what's being said in the Chinese state media?
For that particular post or video, we're not sure. I don't think that's Chinese government's position to declare that Weaponizes Island used to be part of China. Beijing has never declared that through its MOFA, Foreign Ministry spokesperson. I don't think that's the official position. But the Chinese government is not against this idea being floated on the Chinese internet. That's not just a signal to the Philippine government, that also is a signal to the Chinese people that China, the government, the party state is eyeing on China-Philippine relations. And they are guiding people's attention to what's going on around the Philippine waters.
Okay. Now, in a new campaign ahead of China's 80th anniversary of victory over Japan Day on September 3rd, Beijing claims the entire South China Sea should have been returned to China with Japan's defeat in World War II under the 1943 Cairo Declaration and 1945 Potsdam Proclamation. Japan did indeed have control over some Paracel and Spratly Islands in the South China Sea before the war, though that control was disputed among other claimants such as the French, Vietnamese and the ROC. The Cairo Declaration was a communique, not a legal document, signed between US President Roosevelt, Prime Minister Winston Churchill and Republic of China Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek in 1943 during the course of the war. It says, Japan shall be stripped of all the islands in the Pacific which she has seized or occupied since the beginning of the First World War in 1914, and that all the territories Japan has stolen from the Chinese, such as Manchuria, Formosa and the Pescadores, shall be restored to the Republic of China. Now, here is the text of the San Francisco Peace Treaty, the only legal document from those of World War II. It says, under territory, Japan renounces all right, title and claim to Formosa, that's Taiwan, and the Pescadores. Japan renounces all right, title and claim to the Spratly Islands and to the Paracel Islands. Now, the treaty does not mention who Japan will renounce these territories to. So we've established that China is carrying out this sort of almighty push of disinformation planned before the 80th World War II anniversary. How convincing is that argument?
Well, if you're at least a layperson who's familiar with the history of the Second World War, the Pacific War, for one thing, People's Republic of China cannot claim victory because at that time it simply did not exist. It only came into existence when, Chairman Mao Zedong declared the People's Republic of China in Beijing in October 1, 1949. So how can they basically claim victory, the People's Republic of China when it did not exist during that time? If you only have documents, Cairo, or the surrender of the Japanese on board the battleship Missouri, then of course the San Francisco Treaty, the party involved then was of course the Republic of China, which still in a way exists here in Taiwan, not the People's Republic of China. And of course, again, if you look at the actions that happened during the Second World War, The bulk of the fighting were being conducted by the Republic of China, then the Allied powers, whereas, of course, the communists were up there in northern China waging a guerrilla war that hardly really affected the general flow of the war, in the Pacific.
I mean, this is actually new. This line about the South, I mean, what we know is China has said that for 2,000 years, the whole of the South China Sea belonged to it. Now it seems to have added this extra line just for the 80th anniversary of World War II. How do you interpret this?
Well, Beijing is certainly trying to steer the international narrative about the history of Second World War, about the post-war international order, and Beijing claims that being one of the victors and being the one who paid such a high price during the wartime, China deserves its recognition, according to Beijing. So they won the Civil War, so ROC is no more, it's PRC, so whatever ROC had up until 1949 will be inherited by PRC.
So this is an issue that is raised by some of our viewers. Though it says Taiwan has the same claims as China. How do we reconcile this? Because what we know, and it is our position, is that Taiwan stands very firmly with the Philippines when it comes to the aggression by China. How do we reconcile this?
I believe the Taiwan government, the ROC government in Taiwan, has changed its policy, if not its principle. There is a distinction. But back to history, in 1947, it is indeed the ROC government that published a maritime chart, featured this U-shape boundary, the so-called now very famous 11 dash line. And then when later in 1949 and later, PRC inherited this chart and they simplified it into 9 dash line. So that was, the beginning was definitely that was ROC government. But we, over time, across all these years, we have changed our policy position regarding the South China Sea. We have deliberately moved away from this very expanding claim. We claim that we have sovereignty only over the land features and the surrounding waters that Taiwan now effectively controls and administers. That's Ituaba, that's Taiping Island, and the Pratas, the Dongsha Island. Now that's our government's position. We are different, vastly different from Beijing's position because Beijing claims the entirety of South China Sea. We do not. We no longer, we stay away from that claim already. Now we claim sovereignty over only those land features we effectively
Thank you so much for that clarification, Professor. Renato, ironically, China's actions, in relation to the interview that President Marcos had with First Post, all of this sort of punishment and threats, is it only serving to draw the Philippines and Taiwan closer together? Because basically there is this shared threat.
Oh, that's logical, natural. Again, going back to the old, I'll say Arabic proverb, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So, it's natural. So it's only logical for us to start talking given the fact that we're confronted with a common threat. And it's also pushing the Philippines again closer to enhance its alliance with the United States and more recently, of course, with our security partnership with Japan.
Another part of China's World War II narrative relates to the WWII or Senkaku Islands, which are controlled by Japan but claimed by China and the ROC Taiwan. According to Japan, it discovered the islands in the late 1800s before it took control of Taiwan and incorporated them into Okinawa Prefecture. According to China and the ROC, the islands are part of Taiwan that was occupied by Imperial Japan from 1895, though not so-called returned along with other territories in the post-war treaty. Titus, let me ask you then. So how do we reconcile Taiwan's position on the Senkakus or WWII?
Taiwan understands what's more important. Like Renato shares, we face a threat, an existential threat. And the priority of Diaoyutai ranks lower than that threat. So we know where we stand. We know who should be our allies and the partners and who should be our adversary.
In fact, China claims Okinawa as a whole, not just the Senkakus. Does this then complete the picture? Because its argument that it believes that it can create through lawfare, to give it that legitimacy that Professor spoke about, is essentially the first island chain. Japan, the most southernmost part of Japan, it claims, Taiwan, it claims, and the northernmost part of the Philippines.
Yeah, that basically completes China's effort to control what we call the waters within the first island chain. And of course, China's goal is not simply against Taiwan, Japan, or the Philippines. The goal is basically, once China controls the water of the first island chains, there goes away the Seventh Fleet. There goes away the United States' role as a strategic offshore balancer by having this control. That's why right now the Philippines and Japan have agreed to the notion of what we call one theater. That's why we have a very vibrant, active security partnership with Japan. Probably, push by Japan to provide the Philippine Navy 6 escort destroyers. That will be a boost for our Navy. That will be a boost for the cooperation of two parts of the first island chain, the north and the south. What is missing, of course, is the center, which is in fact the most important, and that's of course Taiwan. Completing, of course, the idea that we have to basically take into account the notion of one theater.
We're going to have to wrap it up there. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much, Renato Cruz de Castro and Titus Chen, for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.